I mean, it's just the box canyon that you never really want to get into. It's gorgeous. I mean, it's pretty, and then there's 4 or 5 places to fish. But you tried it. You said maybe we could get up, and like I was, I'm saying, I could probably light my backpack, put the rod in, put some tackle in, and my good boots on, maybe scramble up there, maybe. But I'm not gonna have fun, and I might not be able to do it. And then we go that way, and
maybe tough to come back down.
You roll the dice,
yeah.
And then, or we go back the way we came, because there's a trail right there, and then somehow get up this side, and then we walk that way and we roll the dice, because who knows if the trail follows that side.
Our map man.
Into the unknown.
Yeah. I think it's doable, but with what gear? That's the question.
Right.
So a person can climb out of here, because there's a kind of a trail where someone has before. But whether or not they had Pelican case and camera gear is a different question.
Well, and you saw all the bones up there of the people who've tried. Many have tried.
Yeah, many have tried.
All have died.
Well, possibly I'll go for a scramble, buck naked, up the side of this cliff, and then zip along the canyon top to see if
So solo as a scout?
Yeah, without even a fucking fishing rod.
Well,
to see what I can see, if this levels out and whatever else. And then you guys can fish down here 1 or 2 spots.
If we never see you again, you either got hit by a bear or you've got...
You'll know what's happened. And you hear shrieking. But the waterfall drown out the sounds of my cry. So.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Just shriek higher pitch.
I'll roll into the water like
good.
Revenant. Or
Chum. I'm guessing it looks good up there, but probably he just wants to know. Wants us to know where he's leaving from. Say, I think he found the horse trail. Is my guess. We'll find out.
I think if Superman were fishing for trout, and he wanted to fish out of the super coolest super fortress in all of the Rocky Mountains, I found his camp. There's an empty bottle of Captain Morgan's rum in the fire ring there. And also the river flattens out up there. But there's some geology that needs to be explored and needs to be photo documented, because beyond fish, beyond even beer, possibly even beyond ladies, that's how exciting the geology is up there.
That's not possible.
I can't believe I just said that.
That's not possible.
But it's really exciting. It's quite a scamper for about 10 stories of stairs, and then you're on top of the world up there. We were so remote, and just no people, no boot prints, just nothing. We're just sort of in the middle of nowhere. Welcome to Canada. That's how it is here. Hey Hank, welcome to Canada. You know, like, we're not in a park. There aren't picnic tables or marked trails. It's just like, figure it out. You could use plant roots and trees to stabilize and grab yourself, but it was a bit of climbing on all fours with underweight, under load. It was quite a bit different than just going up in your hiking shoes. So we were definitely on the path less traveled, on the wrong side of the river, finding our own way on game trails, and that made it exciting, but also uncomfortable.
The whole goal was to catch native cutthroat trout, and this is a trout species that I'd never caught. I've caught other cutthroat trout, but not the West Slope cutthroat, which is this cool little silver fish and they're called cutthroats because they've got a red line right under their gill plate. And we had no idea how big they would be. We were hoping they would be 30 centimeters or better.
The Ram is in the headwaters of the North Saskatchewan River, which runs through the city I've lived in my entire life. And the more we explored other places, the more I realized that there was this knowledge gap for me and this kind of terroir disconnection with my own water supply. So going upriver into pristine wilderness was really appealing. Before pushing further upstream, it made sense to at least fish this spot while we were at the base of these falls to try and see if any of these holes held any fish.
If you're fishing hard streams like that, you're looking for back eddies, you're looking for places where the fish can kind of hang out. And because trout and striped bass and a couple other species, they're ambush killers. So they'll like to sit and they'll see something and they go flap and they come out and get it. So they will sometimes hold in riffles behind rapids because that's easy pickings because they can sort of sit behind a rock in the middle of the stream and come out and get stuff. But generally they're going to be in a pool. I don't fly fish. I'm terrible at it. So I was using conventional gear and used things like panther martins and Mepps spinners and little Rapalas and things like that, cast masters. And we basically looking to go pop and put it right in the exact spot and then kind of work the lure and hope a fish is there.
It was a huge relief to see Hank latch onto some fish. It kind of proved that, yeah, there's fish in here, and made pushing on make some sense. I had heard that way upstream, like into Ranger Creek and further, that there were bigger fish and there were more fish, so I thought, well, let's continue on and see how this goes.
There are rivers and there are rivers. All rock, glacier stuff, turn cobbles, trees growing on the side like this, and it makes getting around not great. This is roaring waters, super ice cold, over rocks, to the point where in some of the places that we were fishing, you could hear like roar, 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 and it was the current moving the rocks under the water, and it sounded like sort of giants walking around. It was hard to get anywhere. It's a total Lewis and Clark trip because Lewis and Clark ate 7 pounds of meat a day.
That seems fair.
Can you imagine how stopped up those guys must have been? Well, but that's true. They ate 7 pounds of meat and then like 1 million Saskatoons.
That sounds like my life.
It's like pemmican deconstructed.
Yeah.
I am glad that we got proof of concept, but we did catch some fish, so that was good. No keepers yet, but thanks to your exploration, hopefully we're gonna lay into the bigger ones tomorrow. But I'm really glad that we got at least that there's fish in that little box canyon, and so it was worth the day. I think we're gonna continue on and look for bigger pools with bigger water, so hopefully bigger fish and hopefully keepers. Because as much as I like camp food, I like fresh trout better. pretty sure that was the worst night I've ever spent in the outdoors. Part of the problem was that I'm not really used to tarp camping, and I'm not used to tarp camping when we got about a solid inch of rain. It was at least an inch. It was just so one end of the tarp's like this over you, but one end was kind of like this, so the rain was kind of like hitting me on this side, and it was sort of like waterboarding. And then the rain stopped, and then it immediately dropped about a solid 10 degrees, and then so I'm like, oh, I was warm, I'm kind of enjoying this rainstorm, and then, oh shit, is it cold? Because I live in California, and it's routinely 42 degrees Celsius in the afternoons where I live, and it's 2 Celsius now. So, yeah, it was cold, it was wet, I slept maybe an hour or two, but better now. Fire, coffee, hopefully fish. It was cold and damp and wet. I'm just, and then these guys get up and like, oh, that was kind of bad. I'm like, yeah, it was. Worst night I've ever spent in the outside.
We decided to leave our camp where it was. The location was pretty lovely, and decided to just take a day trip up river and see what we could find.
The fear of falling off the cliff or being mauled by a bear kept you really happy about only being cold and hungry and not being mauled by a bear presently and not falling off a cliff presently. I was hit by a wave of sadness laying in my tent with the storm, like just rain pelting the tent and then hearing the rush of the river behind me. And I was sad not because it was raining, but because I would have to very soon leave this tent camp. I'd have to leave Caveman Jeff on the mountain and then go back to thinking about what I woulda, shoulda, coulda, like about what didn't go right in the past and what I was worried about in the future. So I was sad not because it was raining, but because well, really, because all of life can't be like this for everyone that I care about all the time.
In all honesty, I thought this does not look to me like the type of place that fish would hold up. It was really aggressive, really sheer drops. I thought there's no way. I don't understand how this could hold fish, but we thought we'd check it before we moved on.
And it was right, proper, uncomfortable as hell. I was smiling on the inside about how uncomfortable that was and what that means to the trip, and I was pretty proud that we accomplished something just by being there and staying there and being able to smile through it, because it really makes the win and achieving the object of your desire, in this case cutthroat trout, it made that much sweeter that you overcame the struggle.
Concept.
As we moved out of that really aggressive gorge, heading upstream into kind of a more flat area of the river, there was frost on the ground. In July, it was not what we expected. That level of cold was just not on the agenda, so this was punishingly cold. I don't think anyone was dressed for it.
Zero. There was 0 fishermen. 0 as in none, as in nobody stupid enough to do what we were doing. The hope was that there'd be, here's a pool, some sort of stuff to fish, and then like look over there, and there's another set of stuff to fish, and then just kind of go that way, and that's how our days would be. Not so easy. I don't think it's unfair to say that there was a fishable pool about once every mile. And it's not easy mile. I mean, again, this is all cobblestones or canyons or stuff. So a lot of times we'd have to kind of go back away from the river on the horse path to kind of come up and then say, well, I wonder if beat your way back through the bush to see the river and like, nope, no place to fish there. Go back, and then so it was a slog.
I was really quite happy with the sun. The cloud goes over the sun and it's painfully cold.
I have wet feet now. That's not good.
Yeah, I have wet everything.
We did some work, and you know, to the younger version of me, it was brutal, like absolutely horrendous pain and horrendous discomfort. I can't downplay that, but we never really that in threat of dying. We didn't do anything that reckless. But there are cliffs all around, and there's rushing water all around, and a misstep could have cost you a grievous injury or your life. And you're aware of that, so you're kind of walking that fine line to be careful. It's rare, I think, in life where you're forced to be so in the moment and where your mind is so focused on the present. And I find it a refreshing vacation for that reason. Even if the present is cold and painful or hot and sweaty or thorny and mosquito-y, or good to touch base with being present for a few days. I think it was nice to meet myself. I found myself right where I left me, in the present, on a hunting or fishing trip where you just have to exist in the present like an animal.
Back into the bush, up mountain, find a horse trail, cut the horse trail, walk up the horse trail because it was easier walking than bushwhacking. And then eventually we'd start to hear the river again, and then we'd walk back into the river towards the noise of the river, and then look for some holes. Eventually, later in the day, ended up at Ranger Creek. It took me a while to realize that that's where we were. Ranger Creek was quite a ways up, but we had walked quite a ways.
He's a squirrely one. He's close to the keeper. Total Hail Mary. It's just a really big lure for a really small stream. Not a keeper, but I'll take it. That thing's following it all the way in. We did this twice. We're like, all right, the next pool, so we're done. We're just like, that's it, we're done. And then we'd fish and be like, oh, we went this far. So finally, we're kind of we're all very tired. And then we get out to another spot where we can fish, and it looked great from far away. When we get on it, it's like, you know, because basically when I get to a pool, I'll look at the water for a long while and think, okay, where can I fish? What's the right lure for that? You know, it's not like like a bass fisherman will, like, it's December and it's in the Ram River and it's Tuesday, so I'm gonna use that. And it's more like what kind of lure will actually get action in the space that is allotted to me by the pool. So I figure out what it is, and then and I'll stand there and I'll look, and I'll get ready. It's almost like when you get ready to throw darts. You know, you're kind of getting ready to, and because it's precisely that. It's throwing darts at a fish that you can't see. So, you know, you find a spot, and I like to work in a fan pattern. So, on the left, bam. So the problem we're having is that it's beautiful, it's wonderful, and I'm catching fish. I mean, the conventional gear is working. We're fishing a pool and we're getting a couple of really nice, nice for the mountain stream. You get 10-inch fish, 10-inch cutthroats, and then but they get wise, and then you switch up bait, and maybe you can catch a few more. And then we have not seen anything over 10 inches, so I'm not entirely sure that we're gonna find a keeper in this spot.
Everyone made the call that we're just not proceeding farther than this. This had been difficult, climbing up and down banks and rocks and walking upstream, and we were all ready to turn back and make some food and just kind of settle in for the night and regroup, basically.
Bye-bye! 11. It's kind of fun, actually, even though they're too small.
It was a real team effort, and Hank caught fish. Unfortunately, none of them were of the legal size, but we got to see and handle and touch the fish. So we touched the spirit of the animal world while we were in this beautiful place, and I'm really happy for that.
Put my forager hat on, like, all right, I'm been to Rocky Mountains, 2,000 miles south of here, and how different could it be? The answer is really, really different. So I'm walking around, and now I'm looking for stuff to put on a pan, and I'm not seeing much of anything. It's weird. It was a really austere environment. Lots of the same plants, but not a lot of diversity. And the only thing that I kind of saw over and over again was some fireweed. This is fireweed. It's a alpine, obviously, flower. And you can eat really all parts of it, but as it gets older, the stalk becomes not palatable. So you generally eat the leaves as like a spinach green, and then the very young shoots. The very young shoots are, you cook them like asparagus. They don't taste like asparagus. As I've said several times, foraging can save a ruinous day of fishing or hunting, and today would be one of those days. And this is crazy though. Like it's a hard time finding even the regular forage stuff that should be around in July, and fireweed is one of the few things that we're finding in abundance. So we're going to take advantage of it.
As it turns out, the Ram River's in one of the first ranges of the Rocky Mountains off of the prairies, which is cool because it's close. But we would learn that it's also challenging because it's austere, both in just its physical geography and also insofar as what grows there.
And it was an eye opener. It was one of those things where plenty of water, not a lot to eat. And I've been in the opposite. I've been in places like the Sonoran Desert where there's almost no water, but there's tons to eat. So it was kind of an interesting eye opener. Success. This is a kind of an interesting pro tip that fingernails are not unlike bite force. So if you can nip it with your fingernails, it's not going to be unpleasant to chew. So that's too tough. There you go. You got onions and butter, always good. And then add the leaves and some of the tender stems. I had never done anything other than work with fireweed stems. Like, I knew the leaves were edible, but I mean, these stems were so thin. They were, I mean, you could tell. I mean, everything there was just sort of hanging on. Nothing was lush. And so this, I mean, we got some stems like this, but nothing like what I was used to.
I had never really eaten fireweed. I knew it was edible, but we'd never been in a situation where we needed to eat it. The con is that we hadn't latched onto a fish that would have been, predictably tasty and lovely and all the nice words about food. But in this case, we got to work with an ingredient that I probably would have never worked with if I hadn't had to.
Obviously, this dish needs a little bit because I want to stew these greens. But what liquid to choose? So, the last time we got together, we were all about the Molson Canadian. And I shamed you into drinking some. Apparently, they almost rescinded your citizenship for it. But, so then, when I found out I was coming back, I thought, what are the most ferociously bad Canadian beers that we can find? And it was quite the Twitter conversation. We had everything from Labatt's 50 to TNT, which we have a can here and we're a little afraid to drink, but we'll get drunk and drink it later. And the universal acclaim of, yeah, it's really pretty bad, but you could probably drink it, was Lucky Lager. Here it is, Lucky Lager, with the secret ingredient to our stewed fireweed greens with onions and butter. Sounds like Canada. Kidding. It's fine. Good timing, man. I just plated it.
I was skeptical until he cooked it. It was hard to stop eating. I would have eaten plates of that. It was heavy and thick, more like a mature kale leaf. It was leathery. It had weight, and it was satisfying. And it was sort of a meaty green, which is a weird thing to say. But it would augment any dish, especially when you're cold and you want something heavy and substantial.
If you're like a normal Canadian, you're gonna poop for a week. It tasted good. They're surprisingly good. I was happy that I was able to make something out of nothing. It was kind of symbolic of the entire leg of the trip. Like, we'll survive, but we're gonna have to eke it out.
Even if we could catch a legal trout, I don't think anybody would want to stay and do the same thing over and over and over in hopes to eat a fish that we might catch that was legal. So we really put our thinking cap on do we stay here? Do we ship out? If we ship out, where do we go? And the one destination in my mind very quickly was back to Kananaskis.
Surrounded by just gorgeous granite spires. And there was something about the air there that was fascinating. The air was preternaturally crystal clear. It was weird. I mean, I could see all the way across the lake somebody fishing. I could practically read the logo on his shirt. It was that sort of crispness. And then you look at the water and it's oligotrophic, so there's not a lot of nutrients in it, so it's blue. And it looked like, the tropics, how blue it was. And the way you fish it is it's a lake like this and has a rim and then it goes whoomp like that. So you fish naturally the drop off. Just rise. All these, brook trout that some chucklehead decided to dump in the lake at some point were just rising on bugs everywhere. And then there's bugs everywhere. Very different from the ram. The ram, there was a couple mosquitoes maybe, but it was too damn cold. There was just no bugs in the ram. which is probably why the fly guys, Kevin and Jeff, did so poorly, because they're trying to run things on the surface, and the fish in the ram were eating fish. So that's why I was doing well. Whoop, complete opposite in this one. So this is this whole process. This whole week was just a process of learning to like, nope, they're rising. If they're rising, you need to run a dry fly. I used a casting bubble and then a long leader, and then I attached it to the fly, and then that caught a fish. So that's good.
Bastard fish. I hate them. Hate this hat. Hate the sun. Hate cold water, and I hate these fish. The fish are everywhere. They're swimming around us. When I was out wading in my non-waterproof waders, like my jeans, there are fish everywhere. And I kept switching my flies to see, you know, if I could find something that they liked. And I changed my technique a little bit to see if I could find something that these fish would bite on. And they would like, these little 4-inch fish would swim up to my lure, my fly, and then like sniff it and then swim away. Like I have some kind of odor or something. But I did catch one bit. I couldn't believe it. I was just pulling back my line, and a 2 to 3 inch fish, really a minnow, bit my lure, and I brought it right up to me. This was my first landed brook trout in the history on a fly. But it was basically a bait size, less than a bait size fish, less than a minnow. But Hank and Kevin, this is sort of a group, a team sport. Hank and Kevin caught fish, so we have fish to eat. So the pressure's off. I can just keep practicing casting, which is pretty much what this trip has been for me, practicing casting.
As it was, I managed 2 fish, but it's better than nothing. But Kevin, fly fishing, river runs through it, hair blowing in the wind. He got his limit, but he paid for it because the water was cold. It was a great day. It was beautiful, sunny. I got sunburned. But, you know, you're standing sometimes, you know, hip deep.
It was only a few hours, and we had, I had caught my limit of brook trout, which was the first time ever. We're not big limit freaks, but it is notable when you've had reasonably not great luck fly fishing and you have to stop because you're done for the day.
There's a thing about alpine trout fishing. So we have it in the Sierra Nevada, where sure you can keep fish, but you never. It's not going to be like here's my trout. It's going to be like here's my trout, and I'd never really done that before because I mean again I'm a saltwater guy and I'm so used to, you know, bait fish that are this big. So I'd never really been jazzed about it. I'm like, yeah, whatever, I can, you know, catch bait in the San Francisco Bay, it'll be fine. But this was our only option. So there's a whole bunch of lakes that would have been great, but some were catch and release only. Some had like a giant grizzly bear sitting on them. Some were like being burned. So the fates were conspiring against me on this one. So we're like, all right, here's my one chance.
So we had 7 fish to cook for lunch, which was just a remarkably different outcome than in the Ram Valley.
I am filleting a teeny brook trout because I want to eat the fillets and then take the remaining skeleton and fry it crispy.
Hank's philosophy aligns with ours in that it's the exploration of what else? Yeah, and what else? Really, you know, got him playing.
Salmonids have weak bones, so they're not really heavy boned like a perch or bass-like fish. So what that allows you to do is to deal with them bones and all in a way that you couldn't necessarily do with, say, a yellow perch. So we ate the fillets, and they were good. You know, I put salt and pepper on them. They're good. Nice. These brookies, because they're a char and not actually a trout, they're kind of kissing cousins, then they tend to have more of a salmon-y flavor to them. So they're stronger in the way that like a Chinook or a red or a silver is stronger in flavor than the rainbow that you're thinking of. So if you're watching this and you're like, I've had trout and then I've had salmon, think of that difference. And so the brookies, it's not quite like a micro salmon, but it's in the same, it's in that same space in your mind. So it's a vastly superior fish in flavor, even at these small sizes that we're talking about. And it's funny because if you're in the east watching this, you're having a heart attack that we actually kill brook trout because that's your native trout. They're not native west of the Great Plains. So the fillets are fine. And then what was next, though, the whole fish.
And I would say, you know, if you're going to do a preparation in the field, this is the one. You get the benefit of minimizing waste because the flesh comes off the bone so well that you don't waste any flesh on the spine, and you get crispy skin. Those are two really key elements.
Those are delicious. You kind of eat them like a piece of corn on the cob. So you can eat the whole tail because you crisp it up. And so then we ate the whole fish and it was delicious. Everybody likes crispy. Everybody likes salty. And everybody likes sweet. So you add sweet, salty, crispy, and then yummy with fish. What's not to love? It's really a kind of a quick cure almost.
Yeah.
So then I had these sort of little racks with some meat on it. And what we did then is I patted them dry and then I added some more oil. And then we fried them hard. Looky. Oh, it's so pretty. That sugar caramelizes and the bones soften and the meat gets cooked and it effectively becomes brook trout bone bacon, and it was retarded good. I mean, it was ridiculous. If you don't think this is delicious, I don't want to know you. This is the best thing I've cooked in probably a year. I'm not shitting you. So they're like this big and you can eat every bit of it. Spine, tail, fins, everything. And it was remarkable. I mean, it's one of those great discoveries that I don't think I would have known to do unless I was faced with Kevin saying, yo, Hank, you need to make something that's vaguely interesting from a bunch of these tiny little fish. Oh, and you only have brown sugar, salt, pepper, and this much oil. Like, okay. It was one of these totally unexpected things that when you're faced with limitations, this is one of the reasons why cooking shows that give cooks limitations are so popular, is because not only are they fun for people to watch, they're fun for us as cooks to, how do you MacGyver this? And sometimes it comes out really well, and this was one of them.
Eating waste, not to reduce waste, and not eating waste because you're starving, but eating waste because it's delicious. And then you're like, what is the waste all of a sudden, you know?
You see, I had done that bone stuff and that fried bone stuff with sardines in the ocean before. And it's similar, but it's a very different flavor profile. And doing it with a trout, is better. It's just better. And it's something that I want to do again. And it's to the point where I'm going to take this hard-won knowledge in the Canadian Rockies and take it to my own lakes in the Sierra Nevada, and I now have something new in my skill set. which I would not have had we not been in this situation.
There's something very different about hiking your camp on your back with your gear and production gear up a valley in an austere space when it's cold and unforgiving and unhospitable, really. There's something different from that than getting into a guided boat scenario on the ocean and then catching, some huge fish and going home and going, I'm awesome. Well, sometimes nature needs to teach us we're not awesome, and that we're not, we don't just, win all the time, and that winning shouldn't even be on the agenda, maybe.
But very quickly in this trip, I realized this is going to be a learning experience in all kinds of ways. So I hadn't really done a lot of backcountry camping. I hadn't done a lot of trout fishing of any kind. And there's lots of newness. So what ends up happening is it becomes less of a adventure grocery shopping and more of a skill building, character building kind of exercise. And, okay, maybe I'm not going to get a keeper fish out of this, but I want to catch something. So, all right, brain work. The second night, I completely changed my tarp setup to make it correct. And so I learned something there. And every kind of step of the way, you learn little bits and little bits and little bits, and it makes you a better outdoorsman, which is a good end in and of itself. But it also gives you don't get me wrong, I get skunked all the time when I do stuff. And it's important to know that. There's some people who think that when, great outdoors people were like, oh yes, we're always bringing in whatever it is that we want. It's super easy. Well, it's not. It's just not. There are plenty of days that are hard, and you get dinged up, and you get frustrated, and it's just part of the game.
It really pushed all of us, I think. And for that reason, I think this trip was a huge success. Forget calories stuffed into your face or trophies or all that. If you're going to actually value doing something and kind of doing something that's more difficult and coming out the other side of it, having learned and pushed yourself mentally and physically, this was that trip. These are good trips for context, for putting all the other trips in context. When you are in an abundant situation, when you are in an easy situation, I think it helps you understand those times.